Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another mod stream. It's been quite a while since the previous mod stream, and that is just how things have been since I've been incredibly busy on the other channel. So, not really something that you can expect to change, but it's all right. Let's go over some content. Do some content plugs. On this channel, we've pretty much just had Mapcraft Season 3, Episode 9 end. We had the Fraudcraft, we had the Fraud Strike. And then, obviously, since then, we had a Dadcaw, so you can check that out. Some pretty reasonable ideas, I feel like. And then on the other channel, it's been a bit more active. Did another map analysis stream. Did this first-person mapper episode. It was like a talk show regarding the mappers and the creators of Anubis, which is a map that's actually been officially added to the game and has been for some time, so you can check that out if you so desire. Had a Metal Makers with Alan Hender from Flashpoint. We basically did an extended Flashpoint analysis desk. It's pretty banging. Did an interview with Tolkien Fanatic. Did another stream with Pullman. Yesterday did a map analysis video, and just recently published this video that was it's like a round table with Adam Fitch, who's the Certo reporter, head of business content over there, MCE, the coach of Chaos Esports Club, and Munster, the coach of the Whalers, who are now free agents. So you can check that out. We talk about the stability within the CSGO scene. It's pretty straightforward stuff there. So that's the content. Let me just put some music on real quick so I can settle on into the rest of the content here, the intro. Okay, so as far as what we're going to be doing today, I've put together a bit of a sheet here, tidied some of this stuff up. One of the main things I want to tackle in the initial segment of working on HYDRA in this particular stream is I want to continue working on and tweaking the robotic Protoss stuff. Recently, with the help of Veek, I was able to tweak the Madcap. Before that, with the help of iQuare, I was able to rework the Lurkers attack a little bit. So things are looking pretty good. I guess just for context, I can show off the changes. First things first, if we go to the Lurker in the Zerg territory here, the Seismic Spines passive, where Lurker projectiles return to the Lurker after reaching max range, that's been like that for a little bit now. That's been there, implemented for a long time. It was like an upgrade before. However, it didn't actually clear the target, so it wouldn't deal damage to the same target twice. That has been changed. So as a result, we've dropped the damage and attack speed, but increased the overall effect. Like, you basically get multiple attacks off, right? So like that's the main difference there. So if we jump into the Lurker's spines here, I can change this 15-3. That's pretty much the only change there. So yeah, so it deals 15 plus 2 damage, and it will deal, the cooldown is 3 seconds. This is obviously a case where we're going to need to do some testing to figure out all of the different numbers and how they end up working in general. But I'm quite happy with how this turned out in game. Right? So like we have this Lurker fighting a Marine. There are still some debug messages that I can get rid of. So this is better suited, I guess, if I just show this. So yeah, fairly straightforward stuff there. So it will deal damage on the return path as well as on the main path. Obviously, this makes them a lot more dangerous. I've also reduced the movement speed of the projectile itself. So if we were to take a look, yeah, back to image. And the other thing was, of course, the madcap. So the madcap change was mostly that it will now start to lose or cool down its stacks over time instead of losing them immediately upon moving the unit. So this obviously makes it a little bit less punishing, significantly less punishing depending on the situation. You can see the massive difference here, even though this one started moving. So, like, this makes it much less punishing to actually have to micro and stutter step your units. So this is obviously a case where if I were to fight with these units and say I'm fighting a bunch of Zerglings, I am actually able to stutter step and still get extra attacks off. Without losing all of the benefits. So this is one of the reasons why I decided to drop their health by 10. However, I've also dropped their mineral cost by 25, which might actually be too much. Like, I thought that they might be a little too expensive anyway, given that they mandate an add-on. But that might get reverted maybe even before the patch, depending on how some like pre-patch testing goes. Unfortunately, I don't think we'll be able to release the patch in time for tomorrow's game night because of some limitations. HYDRA has been sick, so he hasn't been around to continue working on the project or on his own stuff, which in a way is fortuitous because at least he was able to get his mapcrap submission done, which people seem to have enjoyed. However, as a result of that, we haven't been able to debug a crash that continues to happen, and I'm not sure if it's related to basilisks specifically, but it is related to creep spread, and I'm not 100% sure what's going on there. So that's something that has to be sort of taken care of as time goes on. And if we can manage to figure out what's causing it and fix it before the game night happens tomorrow, then all the more power to us. But it's really difficult to know what exactly is causing something like that. And just disable the text message here. Or the debug message, since it seems to be working fine. And then we'll just test to make sure that it's actually been removed. Normally I would comment stuff like that, but we have the git commit history to grab it if we need to, so it's not that big of a deal. That override thing, I think, is a hard code thing related to... It's like some sort of weird gimmick fix thing to fix it not dealing return damage when it's targeting an allied unit or an own unit. Yeah, that's what it looks like when I'm looking at this fragment of the code that I can see anyway. Because it's checking if the source, if the splash type is friendly, safe, like ally safe splash damage, which lurkers are. And then if the target is the same one as what was attacked, like manually attacked, then it will deal damage on the return. So just an unfortunate bit of shit that HYDRA has had to deal with. Very very unfortunate. Not really sure why I just had to rebuild, considering all I did was edit some comments. Or why it rebuilt for so long, I should say. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get to a point where I have like where I've dodged the first one, but I get hit by the second one. harder than it looks. There you go, it happened there. Just wanted to make sure that that could even happen. So yeah, that's pretty cool. I think the new lurker is going to be much more positional. That's one of the reasons why I slowed down the projectile, because I'm actually adding more power to it, obviously. So it needs to be balanced in a bit of a different way there. But go ahead and push this. I did a classic start the stream while also having to use the bathroom, so that's pretty amazing timing for me. All right, so we've got a lot of things here for game state changes that I still want to make, mostly targeting the new Protoss robotic units, like I was mentioning earlier. I think in the last mod stream that I did, I talked about how I wanted to actually give the sort of attack speed. I wanted to give the vassals a passive, basically, and make them a bit less about actually dealing any sort of... I mean, they should deal their own kind of damage when massed up enough. And the idea is that just by virtue of them enhancing each other, it's almost like they're getting stronger for them, for like as they die or whatever, which is a sort of mechanic that I've leveraged in a few different places. However, vassals are going to essentially take what the simulacrum passive is and turn it into like an enhancement passive. So simulacrums currently have a passive where when robotic units die, the simulacrum gets a benefit. Whereas the vassal will be like, when the vassal dies, allied robotics get a benefit, which is also the same thing as the Barghest, which is also going to be revised a little bit later on as well. So the idea currently is that the vassals are going to essentially be living up to their name and be sacrificed on the front lines for stronger or more powerful robotic units to get advanced, to get upgraded or enhanced or whatever. And as a result of this passive being there, I'm obviously going to have to revisit the raw damage values and stuff. I do want to increase their attack speed and reduce their attack damage so that they are a little bit more about like prolonged skirmishes and stuff where possible. And I also think that this just fits in with their style more. It doesn't really make sense for them to do so much damage individually. If we look at their mineral cost buff that I made, where I dropped their mineral cost to 50 from 75, that was because they didn't have any sort of passive and they didn't have any real sort of utility or power associated with them in the same way. Like they had the sort of very specific interaction with simulacrums, but other than that, they didn't have much. This is a case where the new passive that I'm projecting is going to certainly add some value to them, and that value will need to be represented by their cost going up slightly. Which obviously means you're kind of paying for stuff that you might not be able to use in all cases. Obviously, low numbers of vassals and very few, or just any number of vassals, but low number of more powerful robotic units to benefit from the vassal's death will result in essentially the unit not giving you as much as it could in terms of the cost effectiveness of the unit being actualized on the battlefield. So it's something that I think is going to be really interesting and should be a nice difference when you're using vassals compared to other things. And then on the simulacrums side, I kind of want to take another look at its stats, not only to make it less individually powerful, as the note says, but also to keep it in line with what its new passive is going to be, where it's going to create a copy of itself. Right now it says after killing a unit. I think there's probably a better way to track that. Like I was thinking maybe after so many attacks, or something like that, like, or after so much damage is dealt. Something that's somewhat simple to quantify, and also something that ideally we would be able to show visually, like the process building up. Like, oh, they're about to get into, they're about to split, you can tell. Like, I think maybe the idea I had was like time in combat or something. So that way it's like the longer they remain attacking or being attacked or whatever, that accelerates it or something like that. Or maybe it could be based on damage that they receive. I don't know. Like, do I want to guarantee that you split at least once per simulacrum, and then like there's a cooldown on the split? Like that feels kind of unintuitive. Um, for it to only be a simple passive of splitting when the shields drop or something, which is an idea that I had. Obviously, then it would have to only split once. Um, maybe the behavior could reactivate after restoring the shields to full power. And so it would, when it splits, it doesn't have any shields on either of the clones, like the copy or the original. But if the shields get restored by a shield battery or just by a natural regeneration, then that would be a case where, or I guess an Archon dying as well would give them shield healing. That would be a case where obviously you have opportunities for additional splits. It's just that it's hard to like visually show which units can split and which units can't. There's no like flitch by the way, switch we can flip on the unit itself to be like light up in a different way or something, you know? What's up, Luciferius? Welcome. A lot of this stuff is based around existing code or like new code rather. I could refactor and revise the simulacrum passive into the vassal passive, but one of the things that I think the stuff that's in this patch here or in this document here probably won't be acted upon until after the current patch that's in the works is released, because of the fact that it would essentially require, I would want to like ship a whole robotic rework at roughly the same time. Like I wouldn't want to implement the vassals but not revise the simulacrums, especially since they're so similar in terms of what the vassal passive is. Like it's very much just a revised simulacrum passive moved onto another unit. So it would really rub me the wrong way if I shipped a version of the game where both of those passives existed simultaneously. With Clarions, I'm still not 100% sure if I want to have Phase Link, or if I want to have them have a weapon. The problem that I can see is that Phase Link feels really powerful as an ability, but I do think that if the unit doesn't have a weapon at all, and Phase Link is just always active, that might actually be better for balancing out the unit's expectations for the player, similar to the Shaman, where we made it so they're always channeling some ability or another. I feel like in this case it makes sense, especially since the only thing you lose is the weapon. You don't move slower. There's no like positional handling. The other thing too is that it's like one less thing that you've got to like manually toggle on or off, depending on the circumstance. So like not only is the decision not that interesting, like it's not that interesting to decide to enable or disable your Clarion's weapons, because the Clarion weapon themselves, it doesn't offer anything. There was a draft of the unit where the weapon would do some like mark a unit, and then allies could get bonus shield leech or something if they attack that unit or something like that. Like there was some idea there, but I couldn't make it work conceptually without being really overpowered or really pointless. Like one or the other is like too much of a feast or famine concept in my mind at the time anyway. So short of implementing something like that, which would add a lot of, I feel like it would probably overload to the unit specifically. There's not really much value in disabling the weapon. It's just like your generic weapon that you have to, like a sort of a placeholder. It's almost like sort of like the arbiter weapon in a way is how I liken it. It's like, okay, this unit has a weapon, but it's nothing. It's like not even worthwhile. That's a case where I think it makes sense to maybe just remove the weapon entirely. So I could do that for the Clarions. The problem is I don't know if I could ever. I'm not sure how to do what Icor did to the Shaman and make it so that Phase Link is always active. This seems like a relatively simple thing to do, though. I would say we'll just say remove weapon and make Phase Link always active. I can obviously do the first part of that. Not sure how to do the second part of that. But I think that that's a better position for the Clarion to be. It's a dedicated support drone at that point. And maybe if it feels still like very specific, like it does, obviously what the weapon allows it is a little bit of versatility so that it doesn't have to be just a support drone. But I think it's fine if it is just a support drone. It's just like, do we have to add any additional power, like utility to the unit or something like that? since we're obviously removing any semblance of like actual power it would have by itself, independent power. Um, how do we approach something like that? I'm not 100% sure what would be done for that. They're very vulnerable. Um, maybe we keep phase link rather than making it always active. Maybe we make them a spellcaster. We give them give phase link an energy cost again, make it so that it drains energy over time, and give them another ability that does something different. That it's like maybe it'll have two channels, like a channel for phase link and a channel for like a something similar to the Sentry Guardian Shell thing, where it like reduces incoming projectile damage or something. But I feel like, well, I mean, for one, that's like pretty overlapping with the idea of decreasing damage dealt to shields. So I probably wouldn't want to do that exact thing. But I'm thinking of some sort of aura-based thing. I'm not really sure if Protoss needs anything else, though. Like, that's what I'm thinking is like, maybe if I come up with some idea that would really benefit specifically like Protoss robotic branch tech or something like that, like the play style that I view as being robotic branch tech, the sort of similar play style. If there's something like that, I could see a world where that ends up happening. Like maybe you have a haste passive or something, or not passive, a channel where you increase movement speed on the units instead of shield, like increasing tankiness or something. And switching costs energy and obviously drains energy over time. I think that could be interesting. At that point, we would have to remove the Harmony Drive passive that increases its movement speed based on current shield count, because we're no longer having it be very specific, specifically like a shield related unit, which is probably fine, I guess. But I don't know. I'll think about that. It still feels like maybe it's a little bit much in terms of complexity for the unit, but we'll see. Revise weapon increase range for the Barghest. Yeah, for the Barghest, it's something in a similar boat to the Simulacrum and Vassal, where I'm revising its passive, and I'm also going to be revising its weapon. So that's something that I have to think about a little bit more. I'm not sure if the passive of increasing range for each nearby allied Barghest totally makes sense. I kind of wanted it to be one of those units where you had like the Barghest that would, if you imagine a world where like it's shooting a beam instead of a missile or whatever, I would love for an ability to be like like Barghests synchronize their attacks and like focus a beam together, like multiple units focusing a beam together to increase the damage of it or something. Increasing range instead feels like it could get pretty crazy. Whereas at least if it's like increasing damage or attack speed or something. The main problem with increasing attack speed is that overlaps with the Vassal Death passive. Increasing damage feels like it could also get very much out of hand. There's no natural cap to range or damage. Increasing range, like I said, there's no natural cap. It could certainly get out of hand. And if I put in an artificial cap, it feels artificial, right? So I'm not 100% sure what to do with that one, actually. Maybe they have to target the same unit or something. Not sure. I'll think about that. So yeah, the Barghest I'm the least confident on, I guess. After some thinking emoji. So anyway, all that aside, it doesn't seem like we'll be able to do too much work on the game state today just based on that. So we're gonna pop open our ice map from a little bit ago. If you recall, we were working on that a little bit earlier before the before mapcrap took precedence. I was doing this like coastal water stuff. I still have to do it over here. I have actually looked at this map. I added this rocky ground and like moved some cliffs around a little bit. Nothing crazy, obviously. But I have some thoughts about map design that I'd like to share, and I think it'll be really interesting to compare this current layout to like what it turns into later. But before I do all that, I do indeed have to use the bathroom like I intimated earlier, so I shall be right back. And when I return, we're going to jump into my thoughts on map design, specifically with HYDRA and some of the things that have changed there, and also beyond that we're gonna have some words to say about this map and as we work on it. So stay tuned. All right, nice quick BRB. You feel like a new man. All right. So yeah, one of the things I've been thinking about when it comes to map design, specifically with how HYDRA changes things, particularly after I've fixed some bugs that Figuda reported about resources, was that since resources will regenerate to an upper limit of 5k, it actually matters how many resources you start out with in the mineral fields. And in such a case, there's basically like, I think it adds another layer of decision making to if you have a third or a fourth base, like a couple of bases that you can pick from for whatever your third is, or even maybe your natural. These are cases where you're deciding, do I want to go for something that's closer but has lower initial resource counts, or do I want to actually like delay taking that base because I know it's going to be safe, but I want it to bank up more money beforehand and I don't want to invest in like, you know, tier 3 to get quarries or whatever. So there's all sorts of thoughts that I have regarding that sort of thing. It's not really as much of a decision maker as as it is for Terrans. When you compare that to the way that the Zerg handle it, they have to get Irilith Quays anyway, so it's not really the same deal. Like, they don't have to morph their overlords into Iroleths, but they have to get an Iroleth Quay eventually if the game goes on long enough. So I guess it's almost like, in that way, it's much more similar to Terrans, actually, because Terrans have to get a science facility if the game goes on long enough, and they already have command centers. Maybe they'll already have add-ons for those command centers, but that's a different story. The main thing that I would take away from the current setup for HYDRA is just that little change with regards to resources means that you do have to consider as a map maker, like, where am I going to put higher yield bases? Am I going to make use of like higher initial resource counts in the bases? And if I am going to do something like that, how's it going to be like dealt with, basically? So I think that plays a role in it, although it's not really been explored much. Even in my own work, I haven't really moved on past the default of 15K or 1.5K, 1500. But another thing I've noticed with the AI being heavy sort of proponents of, what's the term? Like, because the AI goes so fast with so many units sometimes, it gets to a very large number of units in the map state. I think that has an interesting effect on map balance, because you essentially always have to be worried about flanking positions, and you usually can't build enough static defense to properly fend off massive armies. That's been my experience anyway. Like, okay, small attacks that just like accidentally bumble into my defenses all the time because AI are really stupid. Yeah, no problem there. But if they hit you with a veritable force, there's a ton of different things that you have to worry about in that sort of environment, right? So I've been thinking about map balance and comparing it to some of the vanilla maps where I think some things that remain the same are related to the decisions to essentially have the maps be more closed off and have not too many pathways. That stuff is still probably like a good starting position. You kind of have to know when you want to have really open things, really open passageways. I think the more open your passageways end up being in a map level, the more likely it is that your map will favor the aggressor, because the more aggressive options you give players, like, essentially it's really hard once an army gets into a position of power. It's really hard to root them out if the map is large enough that your army, your main force or whatever, could be somewhere completely different. Now, I think part of that is also stupid brood war thinking, like essentially thinking that has been carried over from playing brood war a lot. Most of the time, because of the supply cap, you don't want a lot of units lying around doing nothing, because that's like dead money, right? Like, it's money that's not giving back in any way. In HYDRA, you still don't really want units that are doing nothing, but I think at the extremities of your influence of power, you probably do want maybe 20 supply worth of units, maybe 30 supply worth of units, something that can at the very least stall until the rest of your army can respond to a threat. I've always affirmed that map control and having vision on your opponent would essentially work to do something similar, where you're not, because you get the information that your opponent is going to attack you, or that there's a credible threat in an area, you get that info earlier than your opponent actually attacking you. You have the opportunity to move, and so you don't need as many units in that area or whatever. Like, from a game theoretical perspective, you can look at it and say, based on this map state, I can have my army in an entirely different area, and I have X amount of seconds to relocate to catch an army that's on the move, if I can spot it while it's being prepared. But the problem with that logic is, I mean, Protoss have this with observers. They can actually do this relatively easily if they have a nice ring of observers. Now it obviously does interrupt your worker production, which is actually a big deal. But they can still do it in HYDRA. Like it's not as crazy for them. For Zerg, you either have like borrowed units or you have overlords or whatever, and you don't really want to be like losing that shit in the middle of a fight or like before a fight, unless you've got a lot to spare. But even then, it's like still it's a more risky investment. I guess since observers can't be upgraded, like they can't be speed upgraded, they're even a bit on the riskier side. It's a lot of gas to lose out on over and over again. So maybe that's something to think about as well. But I do think that the other races have a pretty difficult time doing it. Like if you're going to go for comsats, you're giving up nuke silos and quarries. That's a little bit, that will be less true once the treasury fix is in and I can actually give that unit a button set. Because then I can give the treasury the ability to actually build the add-ons like it's supposed to be able to. So you'll be able to use more comsats. I guess the problem there is that obviously you're let's just say good luck actually like selecting all of them or whatever. You're gonna need like a camera hockey dedicated to wherever you put a comsat farm or something. But if we look at anyway, like if we go back to essentially the main point of me thinking about all this stuff, if you consider the fact that it doesn't seem reasonable to expect that the player will always be able to have map knowledge. They need to be able to delay attacks in some other manner. And I'm somebody who believes that the best way to do that, like I was saying, is either have like a really high amount of static defense, which gives you like diminishing returns anyway, because static defense is only so, shall we say, potent. Okay, I think that's right, actually. Anyway, static defense is only so powerful, and it does take up a lot of space. So I kind of look at it as almost unlikely to be super useful in a lot of cases. Again, for a full frontal attack, not just like throwing off an initial like small little raiding party or whatever. Static defense is really good for that, but it was never really meant to be an answer to a full attack in the same way, you know? So that seems to be the enlightened take around these parts anyway. And as a result of that, you do need a bit of a standing force, almost garrisoning your area. Which is kind of neat, I guess, but it's definitely on the weirder side for an RTS. Like you don't really see that being the, especially like something that's built off of Brood War. You don't see that very often. So the way that this manifests in terms of map design is that more pathways mean more pain for whoever is the defending player. And that is something that I don't think can be like completely eschewed. I think that's almost like, I'm not going to say indisputable, but it feels really difficult to get past something like that. So actually, I think I have. Yeah, I do. Nice. Not sure if that is actually what I think it is. Oh, apparently it's not even what I thought it was anyway, so. Woof. Okay, so that's that. What's this? No, I'm afraid I don't know any of them that look like that. What the fuck? Alright, I'm gonna be a little perplexed for a bit. Oh, well, I found that one. So that's pretty cool. Sure. For the bridge, there's like some specialty tile, I think. Gotta love DF for putting together all these different blends so that I don't get completely destroyed at every turn. I don't really like how straight this ended up being. That feels pretty bad, actually. I wonder if it wouldn't make sense to maybe pull this one down. What's up, Marduk? I am modding Brood War. Right now I'm making a map in Brood War, but it's for use with a mod. So, still modding, in a way. For example, this is a custom tile set extension for the ice tile set. Gives us a reconstruction of the water that was in the beta, which, for my money, looks better. But the reason why I'm using it here is mostly because it blends with snow instead of blending with dirt, which is what the original set of tiles did. I was actually going to be, at some point, looking into getting into modding Counter-Strike. I still probably want to do that, but really the trouble is that apparently it's really difficult to mod, like to add new things. Like you can pretty much only replace things, it seems like, which is totally not my cup of tea personally. Yeah, there's no auto tile for extended tiles. Well, you'd call it like the isometric tiling, the excuse me, the isometric diamonds like this. So I've got to manually place them. Hold on, let me put some more music on. It's got to be a good one in here. I'll try this one. Okay, how do we want to handle this one, huh? How's about that? Oh, well, this is already a skip. Bye. Where's my, Alright, we'll try this one, I guess. So what I'm actually doing is on my second monitor, I have a brush palette, which has some pre-selected things. And then for all of the specific tiles, I go into the tile set palette here. So that's why I keep like moving my mouse from left to right over here. I have to do an SEM draft, sort of like introduction to mapping type video. My previous one was kind of it wasn't general enough, I feel like. So I'm going to do some broad spectrum ones where it's like, here's SEM draft, here's what it does. The one thing I won't be able to do is talk about what advancements it has over StarEdit, because I literally haven't used StarEdit in over a decade, so I have no idea. But sometimes it's just like that, man. What's up, Beaver? How you been, dude? Yeah, StarEdit doesn't even allow you to do tile sets, like tile selection on a rectangular basis. I don't even think you can copy and paste units in StarEdit, which I know sounds fucking crazy, and it is. But that is the age you live in if you are a poor soul still using it. Like there actually was an old map crap theme a long time ago where it was map must be made in StarEdit or something. I took it out so quickly though because I could not bear to be responsible for somebody's fucking mental meltdown, which would have been completely warranted. I would not want to do that to somebody. Oh, I guess that actually was just by happy accident the right tile there. Yeah, so I would. That's actually been a topic of somewhat recent discussion because essentially one of the only. Well, I don't actually know if this is the only person to use StarEdit recently, but certainly one of the only people to actually talk about using it recently and like openly profess that they prefer it was Andrea Rosa. And even that person, like he's already started using SEM Draft, although they use it for post-processing or something like that. Basically, or post-production, I think, where basically once the map is like done in Star Edit, they just go and detail it or whatever. But at that point, you might as well just use it. You know, I don't really see much of a reason to like pick and choose in the same way. But yeah. At least some people are seeing the light. That's all I can say, man. The thing that always got me about using Star Edit in this day and age is that it's almost like a turbo version of using of not modding. You know, it's like if you're not modding, just by definition, you can't create anything that hasn't already been created. You know what I mean? Like you can't will something new into the world, as it were. I don't really want to do that. Okay, I think I can salvage this one this way. So we do this, and then we do that. We do this. And then... Wait, what is next anyway? I think I do this? No. Oh, I have to do this. I'm pretty sure. I think it's that one. Hard to know. That one matches the best, so we'll say that much. Yeah, so you probably are thinking of SCAI Edit. I think the most popular version was version 3, so SCAI Edit 3. Right now, the de facto manner of doing it is writing it in Notepad++. I've got a syntax highlighter for all of the opcodes that I've written. That either I have added to the game or they've been added by somebody else. So if you go to like the best place to go for all this stuff is this link here. I'll put it in the chat. And you just go to Starcraft content, and then down in the educational materials section, you'll see a whole section for AI. There's the starter guide, which sort of introduces you to AI for people who've never used it before. But it'll also give you like a tools section right here that you can take a look at and some references and stuff. And then there's like a couple of reference sheets. This is like for all of the default commands. This is for all of the new commands that have been added. And there's like some other stuff over there. So if you're interested in picking it back up again or you want to take a look, that's where I would go. But we mostly write it in Notepad++, and then we add it to the Python modding suite's version of SCAI Edit 3, which is called PyAI. So you can also grab that from that AI starter guide that I shilled a little bit earlier. I'm not quite at the level where I can send you a reference for every question you have about Brood War, but I'm hoping to get there someday. Obviously a very specific life goal that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. If you asked me to explain it, I probably wouldn't be able to. But that's them's the breaks, you know, that's how we do it over here. Yeah, I don't actually think that's the intended. I think I'm supposed to use that. Or was the other one that I like sort of did? It's over here. There you go, dude. We figured it out. One of the things I'm trying to keep in mind as well as I'm doing all this stuff is like keeping a mental map of what areas are still viable for like free movement, excuse me, and what areas are a little bit more constrained. I think in general the map is pretty open though. The main concern is going to come from the fact that there's currently 8 players placed on the map, whereas my original plan called for somewhere between 6 and 8, and I apparently defaulted to 8. So that will be something where I think as I flesh out more of the area, I'm just dealing with this because this is like busy work that I'd rather get through over time, and it kind of looks cool when it's done. You know, it looks pretty satisfying. But yeah, that's the majority reason why I'm tackling this right this second. Oh wait, that's this one or something. Oh wait, no, this is me grabbing the wrong one again. There we go. All right, we only have 2 more sections to go, conveniently separated by these bridges. It's great. Mm. Okay. Unfortunately, we don't have all of the edge tiles that we would like to have, but it's all right. We can make do. I actually don't know off the top of my head which ones these blend to. Okay. Just doesn't sit right with me to have it be so like straight and narrow for no reason, basically. Yeah, you can really tell that we're limited on tiles in this area just based on that, but thankfully I was able to at least mask part of it. Oh, wait. Cool. Just about done with this sort of slow process of fixing everything up. Making it all look nice. Thankfully, like the natural balance that I struck over here, I think worked out really well. Like the sort of shape of the ice placeholder gray box, whatever you want to call that, I think came out pretty nicely. So I shouldn't need too many pivots in this area. And of course, I can always come back to it in the future, should I desire some sort of additional variety. Maybe over in this 4 long one, I think it's probably a bit much. There we go. I think one more for good measure, to be honest. Hey, give me that. Oh. Right. That looks good to me, I think. Just remembered I just got reminded, rather, that I neglected to download something. Classic. Actually, I might still have this, but I'm guessing not. I think I deleted everything on my my bin. Yeah. Well, the audio exists. I just have to get it out of there. Fubar did not do me justice this time. So pardon this brief interruption. Sure took its sweet time uploading this file. That is not that large. Definitely doesn't make any sense to me. Let's check in on some comments. We had a ton of people comment, and by ton of people, I mean one person make a billion new accounts and comment asking for a tutorial that I already gave him help with on Twitter, and specifically wrote in the modding starter guide a selection here. There's actually like some small thing that I wanted to clarify in that area, actually. But that was pretty psychotic, so I had to remove that. Some old CSGO videos got comments. Oh yeah, here's the comment chain that got Radio Shack added to the Discord server. Cool guy. This comment by Vik actually kind of confused me, where he said it's pseudo 3D. I mean, like in the sense that the game doesn't look like a side scroller, but I guess he's probably talking mostly about like gameplay implications. Just well, it was a little confusing. I'm kind of scared to look at comments on the other channel. See what we find here. A new section. Comments. Yeah, nothing crazy. The shit section. Wow, this is taking 8 years to convert with no progress bar. Let's try another site. I like how I selected a different target format, but whatever. Why is it gotta be like this? I wonder if there's like an MKA plugin for Audacity. I don't actually know if I have FFmpeg installed, TBH. Apparently, I can't figure out where it's installed or something. I don't know. It's all a prank. I don't know why converting audio is always like #1 annoying thing in the world. Maybe that's what I need. Oh, I see. Wow, 205 kilobytes per second download speed. That's pretty epic. Some fucking Russian server hosted in the International Space Station sending me my audio files. Let's check in. Tried multiple different solutions at this point. Let's check this out. Cool. We might have done it, boys. Might have conquered the internet. Alright, just gotta wait for that to happen. What the fuck? Weird. Now the good thing here is when I'm uploading this shit, super easy, man. Way easier than having to do those timestamps for YouTube. What else do we got here? You can't mod in StarCraft 2, Theos. You just get banned. I mean, you can create a mod file, but Blizzard just named it that so that it would be as like confusing as possible for people. Modding is actually against the EULA in every game, and Blizzard will ban you from BattleNet, or at least from StarCraft 2. In my experience, they banned the guy who made like the sound asset pack that was actually done through modding and not through a game state integration. Also, it would be more work to make StarCraft 2 into a worthwhile experience than Brood War. Brood War is just like if you had to like in terms of the amount of work that you have to do. I still have to do a ton of work for Brood War, but it's way less insane. What's up, Suzer? If that's how you say your name. Good luck with your CS:GO stuff. Not a whole lot of overlap between the Brood War and CS:GO stuff, but thank you for popping in anyway. I'm glad that it's giving some people some motivation. I've been more on the outside for a long time playing community maps, so I figure out least I can do is do a spotlight, and we'll see where that goes. Well, Blizzard's been doing that forever. If you may have missed the boat on this one because this is a while ago, but back when Warcraft 3 was in the early stages of like after its release, basically, it might have even been before Frozen Throne, which only came out about a year after the original. Blizzard actually sent a cease and desist letter to the team that was behind what was called Project Revolution, which was basically taking Warcraft 3 assets and porting them to Brood War, and also taking Brood War and like making 3D assets out of the Brood War stuff and putting that into Warcraft 3. It didn't end up being a very good project, but just because they were basically turning Warcraft 3, like using Warcraft 3's engine to create a version of StarCraft and using StarCraft's engine to create a version of Warcraft, that was enough to get them sort of like, I don't think it was called DMCA back then. There's some other like term for it, but basically they were legally disbarred from doing it. So they've had a pretty long and illustrious track record of fucking anybody who wants to make content for their games. So as surprising as it may seem. Because a lot of, obviously, like, especially with Warcraft 3, they got super insecure when Dota basically replaced their game. Like, nobody wanted to play Warcraft 3, they wanted to play Dota. And so they were playing Warcraft. Like, Blizzard was too short sighted to see people were still buying Warcraft 3 and playing it so that they could play Dota. But because Dota wasn't Blizzard's own map, and obviously because Dota went on to be really big and no longer even owned by Blizzard because they didn't, I don't know why they didn't pick up on it and try to like ride the trend or whatever. But because of that, I think they've made damn sure that you don't have the same degree of access to any sort of custom content, unfortunately. Or like, since the other guy was coming in to Since Suzer was just talking about CSGO things, I can sort of make a comparison there where Valve doesn't really add a whole lot of support for custom content. Like, they're not really that great about, keeping things, for lack of a better term, like reasonable for the workflow. But they also don't stop, they don't ban you or whatever, you know what I mean? So it's like, they just make it difficult for you to actually mod the game and stuff. Then their game is a bit of a mess on the code base level. So it's difficult for even them as developers of the game to do anything. That's also true for Blizzard, but Blizzard just doesn't have the same desire, I guess. Let me see if I actually have anything in my watch later for music. Oh, yeah. Forgot about that one. I assume that's like a StarCraft 2 map or a Warcraft 3 map. I don't even have those games installed, so I don't personally know much about them. Yeah, of course. I'm gonna use this to block out some outpost terrain. I'm still not sure if I even want to use that much dirt on the map. Kind of like the whiteout sort of visual palette. Not sure where the expansion is going to go here. Kind of want to square that away before I do too much detailing. The other thing too about this area is that, again, I'm still not 100% sure about the number of players. That's like another consideration. Like these two players in the top left and top right corners, they might be superfluous. I might be able to take this player in the middle over here and move him to the top middle, or one of those corners. I had the forces already named and figured out. Right, so there's like apparently a a series of like a team of 3 or something. So yeah, all of the greens are on their own team. And then this is the solo Protoss player. And 3 and 4 are a duo. They're a Terran and Zerg duo that are separated. One of the things I deliberately wanted to do was sort of like keep this central area as a free-for-all spot. So that it's like, you want to fight over this area. There's going to be a lot of money and a lot of areas for you to like sort of take and hold. And you almost maybe even want to move your final space over in that direction or something. That's what I would think anyway. So that's sort of my assumption going into this. I've made a few like maps that have free-for-all aspects to them now, and one of the fun things about it is like if the player's kind of like positioned in a way where they are more likely to be caught in the crossfire between a bunch of different enemies. So that's another sort of consideration. In this case, the player starts in the bottom left, and their ally is in the bottom middle. With I've already kind of theorized the initial points of conflict. Like in a Counter-Strike map, you would conceptualize this as like the points where, based on timings from spawn, each team would meet each other. So I would envision the solo, or like this is one of the two players of one of the teams. So this one specifically, I think, is the Terran. If we go and check this, yep. So this is the Terran over here. So the Terran on the left, like mid left, would come into contact with the player around this base with the double gas, and it's not really favored more so for one or the other. Like the Terran can deny with tanks and units like coming down from over here, and this is actually a very difficult place to siege. The one thing that this might actually be too powerful on is if the player takes command of this area. Because the player gets to pick their race, I've got to account for all sorts of different strategies, which would include tanks of their own, and that would essentially shut down the main. So this is something where I might like push the main up by 2 tiles or something. Maybe add some like doodads that stop you from being able to hug the cliff so heavily, and not completely remove that strategy from happening. But like the spacing over here is such that it's not like the Terrans. I mean, maybe with this little outermost edge over here, the Terrans might be able to range your command center or whatever your natural your town hall is. They certainly can attack the refinery and stuff, but I don't think they can completely shut down mining without actually descending down to the low ground. So that is like a deliberate thing. Whereas over here, I didn't yet take the necessary steps to prevent that from happening to the same degree. So there's a couple of things that I can do about that. Like I can add a little bit of unpathable tiles to just make it difficult to position a lot of tanks over there. Maybe not completely remove the possibility for like entirely. So I could do that for like this zone here and then these zones. So that's a possibility. I do think that like moving this up by like just a couple tiles here shouldn't hurt. Gonna move our little town hall decal. And I think that's probably fine. And the rest will be done with like adjusting terrain over here, details over here. So I'll just like draw a location over here and call it, oh, actually, let's do, quick locations around the start locks. And then we'll draw this location over here and we'll say high ground path blockers to prevent tank cheats. Also, conceptually speaking, I'm really a big fan of the unconventional base design of this area, but I am worried a little bit about the freedom for ranged units to just hug the lower cliff and then like a scan or something, some sort of air unit to get vision of this. You can sort of thwart the air vision with anti-air defenses, and you can certainly put anti-ground defenses there as well, like on the mineral line itself. But I'm just not seeing an opportunity for like a huge amount of, I don't know, I feel like this is probably too abusable in this current position. And so I guess I could do like some sort of low ground path blockers to prevent abuse, something like that. I think this area is probably okay. Like nothing is really striking me as random. I actually don't know which one is which for that race. That's Protoss, Terran, Zerg, okay. I do worry about the massive side imbalance. I think maybe I can like manually set their multiplier lower or something. I don't know. Anyway, the conflict point between the player's ally and the uh, mid-right Zerg player is a bit more interesting, actually, where they can, like, the mid-right Zerg obviously has like 3 pathways directly into their base. This one down south obviously gets like really thin over here, but it opens up into what will be a nice base over here, probably like a lot of minerals. So this will be like a base to fight over that both players can actually like contest in theory. There might be a base over here. I think instead there'll just be a ramp, so I can go ahead and pop that over there. Um, I'll have to add to the brush palette some sort of like extended ramp at some point. But yeah, I think those are like roughly speaking where the ramps are gonna go. Yeah, so for expansion, like this is where I think that it's very clear that I don't think the map will actually support these excess players. Like I think as strong of a starting position as this player, like this looks like a neat position to start in. You're gonna have like the water when I finish filling that in. You'll have like some height and stuff to play around with, but it's so close to this mid right Zerg, and I feel like the mid right Zerg wants the bottom right base, and they want this base as well. And it doesn't feel like you give enough room for that area to breathe just because of that competition. Like one of the things that I actually think is kind of interesting to conceptualize is almost like the battle royale style of gameplay. If you consider what it actually results in, it's usually it has something to do with the, say you have like 4 quadrants of the map and there's 6 players in each quadrant. There's going to be like 2 or 3 strong players that essentially survive the initial conflict per quadrant. And then that's going to even be further whittled down to like 1 or 2 per quadrant. And then those titans that have lived on are going to be fighting amongst themselves once the whole map opens up to them, basically, right? In an RTS context. I think that's how you could conceptualize some sort of battle royale style thing. Notably, there's no gimmick about like changing the map size or changing the effective map boundaries or whatever. The only thing is that it's a massive map, but you have enemies immediately close to you. And then those zones that we're thinking about as like quadrants of the map or whatever, sections of the map, say however many players there are in those zones, eventually there's going to be a bunch that get, you know, some of them are going to die, right? And you whittle down to just like the, in theory, the best players, but maybe it's just players that ended up getting somewhat lucky in some capacity. So whatever the case may be there, like you whittle it down to the survivors, and those survivors duke it out with a much wider map, and it turns into like a much more drawn out like macro game, right? That is really exciting to me. The problem is that this map is like a very small size if I was trying to go for that approach. So I would say this could probably end up being like either I move the Zerg player up there or I just leave it open. I think it's probably fine to leave it open, right? We get rid of that player and we could relocate this player over here to where this top right player is. Essentially like delete this top right player, move that one over there. And the question is like, so one of the things that I thought of initially was that there would be a 4-way free-for-all. It was like the player and their ally, and then there's the Terran and Zerg gold and yellow players. There's the green players of a team, and then there's the solo Protoss player who's the blue player. I think that could be actually really interesting. The question is, like, does the map support something like that? Or should I make it so that you've got like one solo. Maybe the solo player is in the middle or like closer to the middle of the map, maybe on an upraised area, and they've got defender's advantage, maybe even some pre-play shit because they're solo. And then you've got the two, like two out of these three green players end up surviving. Like I delete only one of them, and then you have like a team of two, like three teams of two, and then the solo Protoss. Like that could be an interesting situation because depending, like then the Protoss is like in the crossfire between green team and yellow team, and in a way also the human team, the home team. So the home team initially contends with the solo player and the yellow team, and as the game goes on, it's like more about the solo player and more about the green team. Like those come into the picture because of their distance and because of the proximity of other players compared to those players. So yeah, I think that's probably a better place to sort of take this in general. So I would actually like delete that player 8, and I would like move this guy to where player 8 was, this guy to where player 7 was, to open up more space. And then I would move this guy to maybe like over here, and maybe I extend this area to be more of a high ground region. Something like this. You know, we'll figure out the more specific stuff later on. But basically, again, like giving them enough of a defender's advantage to shield themselves from like riposte early attacks or whatever, if need be. I'm not sure if I even want to give them like some sort of through line opening or something. I want to give them like a nice, strong natural expansion that they can take, so they can go into two bases with relative safety. And I want them to yeah, I'm not sure what else would help them get over the hump there and still be a compelling opponent. All right, let me just... I actually completely forgot about this area earlier, so let me just finish essentially detailing this stuff. All right, so I think we're pretty much good to start adding more bases to the map. So obviously we want one over there on that mid-right sort of ice island. We want one in the bottom right, one for the bottom middle player. We're going to need one for the Protoss player and the solo Protoss player. Maybe another on the low ground, or maybe we can just push this high ground a little bit further up to give more of an access way or something. Still not 100% sure how that's going to look. because I do personally want I want like 3 or 4, maybe 5 bases total on this sort of central hill area. So like we have one here, we have one from the main, so there's gonna be one over there as well. And then I want like one on the high ground here, maybe one up against the cliff face down here, down over here. But at the same time, that's supposed to be an area where you can like sort of walk around. I don't know. We'll find space for it though. I think it can fit. I might just have to reshape some areas. Like maybe this area needs to get reshaped. And then let's first do the compound stuff. That's what I feel like doing right now. Assuming I can find it. Oops. Somehow I managed to scroll too far up there. Definitely missed the boat on adding this stuff to my, what do you call it, my brush palette. Too bad you can't control how frequently certain tiles are selected. As far as I understand, there is some sort of like randomness bias or whatever. Man, I could never handle how ridiculous some of the like how essentially how few choices you actually had for outpost tiles. I had to go in and make a couple of extra ones just so that there's a bit more variety. Thankfully, because of the patterned nature of them, it wasn't too difficult. But it's something that I would actually like to do for most of the tiles in this game, I think. Yeah, but even with that, it's still pretty annoying to have to go in and fix the... Just noticed that. There we go. Okay. What else do we got here anyway? Thinking just for the sake of the angle here, I should probably do something like that instead of making it go back. Cool. I feel like this base should be pretty defendable. Now the one, okay, there is like a major concern with this area. In order to safeguard his base, this player really needs to maintain control, like top control. If he doesn't have control of the whole central area, he's... I don't know how he hangs on to his base, I'll put it to you that way. There's a decent amount of turret room at least, but AI doesn't really use that very well, obviously. So maybe we drop a little ramp over here. Just making sure that that podcast episode went up correctly. Looks like it did. One concern I do have is that there's not really a safe bet base for the ally. There's this for the player, but honestly, I think that's probably fine though. I mean, it doesn't have to be. We don't have to play nice. I'll put it that way. We don't really have to play nice for the AI ally. They can do a little trial by fire or whatever you want to call it. I think it'll be fine. Here's an interesting topic of discussion that I think we hear talked about every now and then, but it doesn't really go anywhere in the context of traditional Brood War, is map bias, in terms of like racial bias for a particular map. Certain mechanics or base layout styles or whatever the case may be favor certain races in a different manner. Like, for example, the base that I'm working on right now actually favors Zerg a lot because it's so spread out that in order to get the best yield out of the base, you probably want to be, building multiple resource deposits. Obviously, this is attenuated a bit by HYDRA's game state with Terrans having quarries. Protoss are still kind of shit out of luck there. But it's one of those things where I think there's actually a fair bit of room to explore the idea of essentially having maps that have that asymmetrical balance, but making it so that the game state, in a way, addresses those issues where it's not a gross imbalance. It's just that if you're a different race, you handle this with a different style. You've got different answers or different ways to exploit the terrain such that we still have the right kind of power, the right kind of sort of decision making going on there. I don't think it's impossible to develop a game state that works in that manner. So, just thought that would be an interesting thought to percolate in your brain as you're as you have this on in the background. I pulled some of those resources away from the cliffs a little bit to get a little bit of turret room in there should the player decide to migrate over in that direction. Another thing I am thinking about is whether or not to add a sort of backwards ramp over into this location on the high ground so that you can, in essence, migrate ground units to defend from air raids. Because this is another thing that has been an ongoing discussion lately for the HYDRA sort of the people who are interested in the balancing of HYDRA and how things are looking. Something that's been, I think, sort of topic of discussion is the frequency with which we have like air units deciding engagements, or how successful air units usually are at dealing with squads, sort of like picking off workers at expansions or just destabilizing your area or whatever. Personally, I think that the answer to this is a mixture of, like I was talking about earlier on in the stream, how you should have some sort of like standing army of maybe 20 supply or so around the extremities of your base so that you can at least delay enemy attack forces and keep them at bay. But I also think that something that the game state can do to address this is provide more expensive but more effective static defense options. So we're already planning on adding the ion cannon, but a version of the missile turret that actually launches, maybe area effect missiles, or launches like sort of like the current Madrigal passive, where it's like you attack for as many targets are nearby, you launch a missile at every one of them or something like that. That could be kind of interesting to move over to a new version of like some sort of anti-air turret, or even like a turret that attacks both air and ground that maybe has something like that, some sort of like way to handle crowd control. But it's an expensive device to place, especially not even necessarily just in terms of resources, but maybe it also just has a large build outline, so you have to eat up a decent amount of build space. Like that could be a factory placement or something. Like you could build. Maybe it's not the same size as a command center or something, but maybe you drop a structure that acts as a defensive emplacement, but it ends up taking up a decent amount of space ultimately, and then maybe you've got to live with that reality after you do that. So I think there's a lot of different angles that you could take with stuff like that. So yeah, just some thoughts about level design. 12, by the way, mineral fields in that particular area. Oh yeah, we're going to need a bit of cliffs. Dude, like I say, man, you're never a happy mineral field unless you've got some cliffs nearby, I'm telling you. Make those mineral fields happy. So there's even turret room over there. Dude, I'm learning. That is a problem with a lot of my maps. The resources are like, maybe not in the melee map sense, but I haven't really looked at a lot of the melee maps I've made. Well, I haven't made that many melee maps recently, but in the maps that I've put together, I do notice that I very often don't leave turret room. Something I tried to do a bit better about when I was working on the most recent map that I made. One of the things that I also think is worth looking at is like really non-standard mineral formations. It's something that I noticed that Dark Metzin, Kian, whatever his name is now, this week. He was actually experimenting with in his, I think his latest Mapcraft submission actually experiments with this, where you've got like minerals that are pretty far away from, some mineral fields are like further away than others or whatever. I think that stuff is, I mean, it's sort of evocative of the campaign mineral layouts that you'd get where it's just like such a pain in the ass or whatever, but making it so that there's like a trade-off. I mean, in this case, if you analyze it free of bias and don't consider it like, oh, it's nostalgic, or oh, it's a pain in the ass. Like if you just look at it objectively, for lack of a better term, and see what the actual, objective impact is when it comes to what it does to the game, what it does to your mining efficiency and all that other stuff. I think it's very clear that you're trading off, like, essentially you have a longevity of mining, but you lose out on efficiency, so you're not going to get your minerals as fast as some other bases would offer you. But you are able to mine that base for longer, and in a world where you maybe don't want to overinvest in terms of resources spent on workers, that's an area where, oh, there's like different ways you can play around that now too, I guess. So it's not even just about like, if I only want to dedicate like 20 workers to a base or something, then one of these bases that's less efficient is going to last me for longer overall. That calculation feeds into it, but a base that's less efficient when fully saturated might actually end up being more beneficial if you also have the resource boosters. So if you have like a pennant or a quarry or a Irolith or something, stuff like that can be really valuable, I think. So one of the aspects of HYDRA that I've been really happy with is just how much deeper the game state ends up going. I'm really pleased with that angle. Like there's a lot more. I mean, we still need to figure stuff out. We're still solving some things, still figuring out like what's best and what needs improvement or whatever. But I think honestly it's like a really solid, at least a foundation for what's going to come in the future. It'll probably pale in comparison to the new engine and all the things that we're going to do in that, but given where we are right now and given that it is a mod for Brood War, relative to maybe what you might expect, well, certainly relative to what you might expect given the rest of the scene, but also relative to just like what is possible to create in this engine. I think we're looking pretty good. I'm thinking about slapping a base over here and then maybe sealing this off. But I'm not sure if that would actually be good. I think we need more. We need to do more, like figure out more details. At some point I'll just like chuck some stuff in and see what sticks basically. Okay. So we get the quick markers for the resource areas that we've added today. I'm actually not sure how I'm going to lay out the base over here. It's an interesting area to fight over, but there's not really a spot for me to drop a base. I think maybe something like this. We're sort of like facilitating... I mean, the turret room that we might end up appearing to be missing in this area, I think is probably fine to be found elsewhere in the region, like... Well, whatever. There's a bit more turret room. Might as well. This is another case where the ramp doesn't necessarily help the player that it's near, but it still adds a little bit of a dynamic there, something that you can use to gain some positional advantage. Cool. Well, I think we have done a decent amount of work here. So I will call this, what is this, 28, 11, 20. Go ahead and close that for now. Oh, one of the things that I wanted to add to the Modstream thing over here is Madrigal. Rework tempo change to be somewhat to be similar to siege mode. Give like switch default. Okay, and I think that's pretty much it. So thanks for hanging out today for our mod stream. I'll be back tomorrow for another one. I'll be back in a little while for some Counter-Strike frauding, so stay tuned for that if you like it. And yeah, bye.